Hey guys, so welcome back to the channel. I'm Yogi Doug Johnson, and today I wanted to speak a little bit about too much of a good thing. Before I get into the talk though, I want to thank all of my patrons on Patreon and everyone who donates via PayPal and Venmo. You guys really help keep this going, help keep me doing this work, and allow me to make this content available to everybody for free. So thank you so much for your contribution. Okay, so too much of a good thing. What is this about? Well, this is about a tendency of the human mind to think that if something is good, then more of it is better. So a good example of this might be money, right? Who doesn't think more money wouldn't be better? But maybe this isn't actually true. Maybe for some of us, there is actually an optimal amount of income or money. Allows us to do what we need to do, but also maybe forces us to be creative or to look in places or to do things that we otherwise wouldn't do if funds were unlimited. Also, I think some people, maybe when they have unlimited funds or money, they may become actually worse people. That the fact that they don't have to be held accountable financially to anybody allows them to be rotten people and treat other people very poorly. So, can we have too much money? I think the answer is yes, but I think in most of our minds, we think no. If we hear, I got a raise, we're getting a raise, we won $1 million, everyone congratulates you. Oh, congratulations, oh, that's so good. Well, it's interesting to think about it, right? Maybe it actually isn't good. So there's a few topics I wanted to just touch on in terms of this and look at where too much of something that can be good can actually become harmful. And I think this is true of anything. So this is something that the yogic and the Taoist tradition recognize outright. Too much yin is bad. Too much yang is bad. In Ayurveda, you have the doshas, kapha, vata, and pitta. In the yogic tradition, you have the three gunas, right? The sattva, rajas, tamas. These are energies, forces of nature, tendencies, and they are meant to be in an interplay and a balance. And you can always have too much of any of these things. So there isn't in these traditions a concept of just more of the same is going to necessarily be a good thing. So a few areas where we see this showing up is, say, in autoimmune disease. An immune system is a good thing, right? None of us would really be here if our immune systems aren't functioning properly. And if we do have problems with our immune system, it causes a lot of problem for us. So immune system, good. Attacking invaders in your body, good. But what happens when the immune system becomes overactive, when it starts to do more than its fair share? It actually starts to create problems in our body. So this is an example of too much of a good thing. Inflammation is another natural example of this. When we have an injury, our body very naturally creates inflammation to help the healing process. But in modern life, many of us don't have avenues for reducing inflammation naturally. And so the inflammation lingers, maybe even gets worse, and the body never finishes healing as a result. So inflammation, actually a good thing in the short term, a little bit of inflammation, but too much, huge problem. And this is a problem for many people. I've had to explore many ways in my own life to reduce inflammation, and as I get older, it becomes more and more part of my routine and something that I need to just constantly work on keeping inflammation down. And you can do that through diet, red light therapy, cryotherapy, and other methods like herbs and things like that. So inflammation, another example of this. One that may not be very obvious, and some people might be very resistant to this idea, is cleanliness. So again, I know some of you have your immaculate homes, you don't want them any other way, but I'm going to put forth the idea, and I want you to keep an open mind, that too much cleanliness is a problem. I mentioned earlier about autoimmune disease. Well, one of the theories about why our immune system, modern people's immune systems very often are overactive, is because there's actually a lack of just sort of natural things, dust, parasites, bacteria, things that we would normally come into contact with living in nature, children playing in the dirt, putting dirt in their mouth, things like that, things that parents like, oh my God, look at how dirty you are, don't put that in your mouth, all these kinds of things. But these would be things that actually would be teaching our immune system what is actually harmful and what isn't. And again, a lot of things like that, even though we don't like the idea of it, putting dirt in your mouth or a dirty stick in your mouth or something like that, parents think, oh my God, this is gonna be awful. Actually, our bodies are designed to handle those kinds of things. If you look at a dog will fetch a stick and put it in its mouth all the time. If it were really so dangerous, why aren't the dogs dropping dead from putting sticks in their mouth? Okay, so we're really not that different in that regard, but we think of ourselves differently. And so many of us grow up in these very artificial environments that we call homes, and due to modern technology like bleaches and spray cleaners and vacuum cleaners, we can create an environment that I want to theorize is actually too clean. It's too pristine. There's no dust anywhere. Everything is just sparkling clean. There are no germs on anything. And we think it's great, and we think it's safe, and we think that this is a wonderful thing. But I actually think it's too much of a good thing. Now, the other extreme, of course, is not clean at all, slovenly. That's also dangerous, right? So again, the human mind tends to work in extremes. So somebody hearing this talk might think, oh, well then I'm just not going to clean at all, and I'm going to live in a slum, and then that will be the best thing for my immune system. That's not what I'm saying. So this is the tricky thing about being a spiritual teacher, is a lot of times you try and point something out and people immediately take that to the extreme. Things like meditation is good for you, so then they start thinking, well then more meditation must be even better, and more meditation must be even better, more meditation. Or the asanas or postures. They think, well, more postures, learning more postures, doing harder postures, being more flexible, right? That's another one in yoga, flexibility. Oh, well, if being a little bit flexible is good, then being more flexible must be better. But again, this is a great example. We can have too much flexibility. Most Americans have too little. Most of them do. But some people I know from yoga, they have too much flexibility. They have hypermobility and they can't control their joints. And so they do things like dislocate their joints and create all kinds of problems for themselves. So again, is flexibility good? It depends, actually. Is cleanliness good? It depends. Is having lots of money good? It depends. We can have too much of any of these things. So another example of this, and maybe the last one I'll share with you, is thinking. So human beings have by all means mastered and become the dominant species on this planet by thinking. But I theorize and I believe, and what I see happening in my experience, is we think too much. we try and think about things that really shouldn't be resolved by the mind, but by the heart or by the gut. But we tend to think everything should be done up here. And again, I see lots of things come up on my YouTube feed and other things where people are always talking about productivity, how to be more productive, how to feed your brain with certain herbs and foods that are going to stimulate your brain so you can get more work done and be more efficient. Again, this is maybe going to be a very unpopular idea because I think our society and culture wants us to be good little machines and little thinking machines and be more productive, get more work done. But I actually think this is harmful for you as an individual and ultimately for the society at large, for humanity at large. I think our push to just squeeze more and more productivity out of our brains, to jack our brains up on different foods or herbs or stimulants so that we can be more productive, I think is ultimately a mistake. And I think humanity is actually long past the point where it's gone beyond the optimal amount of thinking. And again, this is something that you see starting very young. You see parents encouraging their children to, what is that called and what is this, and use your words. And I'm not trying to criticize anybody. I get it. You have a little child and you want them to excel. And it seems like in our environment that excelling means being able to use your brain really well. And that might be true in terms of the world, in terms of making money, in terms of having influence, getting recognition. But we have to remember, from a spiritual perspective, there's more to human life than just getting ahead, just making the most money, just having the most opportunities available to us. And in a satsang that I gave on my retreat on September 4th, I talked a bit about how there is a point at which I, at least, seem to cross a threshold where my work, it really starts to feel like work. And it stops being something that I truly am doing as a joy to share with others. And it starts becoming heavy and doing things like self-promoting. As a yoga teacher, that's something many of us are encouraged to do and sort of forced to do. And, all these ways in which I'm basically running my own business, but I don't really approach it as a business. And what I said in the talk is I could be much more successful as a business person if I did. But I sense and I feel, at least for me, that I start losing something when I do that. I may gain in terms of success in the world as the world sees it, as the ego sees it, but inside I feel I begin losing something when I start thinking of my business in that way. When I don't think of my business in that way and I just think of it as me trying to share as best as I can without stressing myself out, without compromising on my beliefs, then it feels good and I do okay. Again, I think I could make more money by thinking of my business as a business and really approaching it as a business. But for me, that's a line that I don't like crossing. And so I prefer keeping it. Those of you who watch these videos know these are donation based. I post them on YouTube, and people who go to Patreon or to PayPal or Venmo, they are the ones that pay me for this content. But anyone is free to see it. And for me, that's probably a bad business decision, but it feels more in line with the spirit of teaching spirituality. And as long as I have this little apartment to live in, I can afford to put gas in my car and maintain my car and put food on my table, I really don't know that I need a whole lot more money. Of course, if I had more money and resources, I would want to pour that back into my teaching and building the Mahapatha yoga community. So that may happen one day, it may not. But what I would like is, if that does happen, that happens organically and without me having to cross that line of, again, too much of a good thing, too much thinking, too much ambition, too much chasing after the almighty dollar. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. Just a few things to think about. Again, I think money, cleanliness, thinking, these are things that we often just assume more is better. If someone is a brainiac, if they have a huge IQ, we assume that that's a good thing. But in the yoga tradition, what we learn, especially with thinking, that the mind can be a terrible master. So there's a saying in the yoga tradition, the mind is the perfect servant and a terrible master. The perfect servant. So if you are a whole human being and you know your true nature, then you can use the mind. It's a great tool. It's a great servant. If, however, you do not know your spiritual ground of being, if you do not know your true nature, then your mind will use you and it will run you ragged. And here's the interesting thing about your mind, if you actually ever really observe it, it's not your friend. It will side with you one minute and then tell you you are a horrible person the next minute. Okay? If you don't believe me, just watch your thoughts. So when you're up, it tells you, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. But one person criticizes you or comments on you, hits on a sore spot, you get defensive, you get angry, and you might feel really, really bad. And your mind has no problem flipping right around and turning on you, making you feel guilty, shameful, depressed, give you anxiety, all kinds of fear. So your mind is not your friend, it's a tool. And so just as a tool can be useful and helpful in one instance and be misused and can be harmful and dangerous in another instance, this is what we want to realize about the mind. Very powerful tool, great tool, but if we don't have our spiritual ground, it is like having a chainsaw and you don't have any control over it. It's just flying around and you're just cutting things up. This is how many human beings, how their mind is absolutely out of control, not only harming themselves but harming others in their life. So anyway, everyone, I hope you got a lot from this. Again, if you want to help support me, check out the links for Patreon, Venmo, PayPal. You can make a one-time donation or you can become a subscriber on Patreon. I do have some events coming up, so I hope you will check that out. And if there are any questions, please leave them in the comments. Don't be afraid to just say hello in the comments as well. And if you're on YouTube, if you like and subscribe and hit the bell icon, all of those things help me out as well as commenting. So I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, namaste and have a great day.